live. All right, preparing to live stream onto Facebook. We're almost up and going. All right, thank you for your patience. Okay, here we go. We should be live streaming on Facebook. All right, meeting is now live streaming. All right, today, gosh, I'm excited about this topic today. I'm gonna get, it's a few different topics that are all related. I'm gonna get a little more in depth into the underlying principles behind the redefined process. So I'm excited to share that with you all. The first thing I want to say is to thank you so much for engaging so well in this group. I know at this point in March of 2021, there's only a few of you in here, and I just have really loved seeing all three of you dive right in to this process and share so openly in the group. And I want you to keep that coming. It's going to be a great, it's not only great for us now, but it's going to be a great atmosphere for new women to join into. They're going to already see so much activity and so much sharing and openness and vulnerability here in the group. So that's awesome. I would hate for new people to come in and be like, it's crickets. They wonder what's going on. Like they're already going to see right off the bat, like how powerful this process is. And more than that, just when you put in the work, like you really get something in return because you guys are really putting in the work. And I said this in a Facebook Live I did in the other group, Women Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse, a live that I did last night, but I want to make sure and address it here to you all that I've realized in seeing you all share and seeing your artwork, which I love so much. I'm such an artist at heart and a visual person. I really love seeing those images. Even those of you who don't think you're an artist, which we'll get to that when we talk about no judgment in a minute. I've really loved seeing that and hearing you all share. And hold on, we're gonna meet somebody here. So I've really enjoyed seeing you all share so much. And hey, Adrian, welcome. And what I said in that live last night was that I realized that I've really created, I'm creating the community that I wish I had had when I was going through this a few years ago, so thank you all for that. It's because of your hard work and how you're engaging in the process that is making that possible. And so, I'm personally getting a lot out of it, and I'm so excited for what's to come for you all and more women who are going to join the group. Let's see. I'm not going to open the chat. I'm going to leave it closed for now, but you can communicate with me through the chat if you would like in a little bit. So today we're addressing the concepts of spirituality, the no judgment zone, and also a concept called reflective distance. First, I want to introduce you all to where some of these core concepts that I talk about in the redefined process, where those originated. So there's an art therapist and author named Pat Allen, who is kind of like a rogue art therapist. She has always rebelled against her more clinical art therapy training. And she worked for years in clinical, traditional therapist settings, and then developed her own process. She called it the studio process, where she did workshops with groups of people, both men and women. And it was all focused on open-ended artwork, spontaneous art making. So she would have a variety of materials out, and the workshop participants, they would come for a series of sessions, and they would just create spontaneous work and then engage in this witness writing process, which is very similar to the reflective writing process I teach you all. So it was very open-ended, and I really love a lot of her core concepts behind that. And that is a version of that process that I started doing myself, and now I've adapted it into this reflective writing process that I teach you all. The reason that I've changed it some, the main reason is to make it more adaptable and easier to teach. So even though her process of the open-ended art making and the witness writing is pretty simple, because it's just making art and then responding, it's simple in practice, but like the concept is complicated when you really get into what you're doing, and it can be hard to teach that. And I've done some small in-person workshops where I taught those basic concepts, and I just learned that in teaching, it helps to break it down and make things a little simpler, and especially in this online format. Okay, so that's why I've given you all some more directive art tasks, and then also broken down, giving you directions and examples of questions to ask your artwork and that kind of thing. So it's for the purpose of being able to teach it more effectively. And then my hope, which we'll talk more about as some of you get to the end of the 8 sessions, my hope is that you can then take this general process and continue to do it with your own artwork, with more spontaneous art making. But I've developed these mantra themes and the progression of the 8 sessions to cater specifically to us having overcome this specific type of abuse, and made it more specific also just for the sake of teaching it. So that's kind of the roots of where this comes from. 2 of Pat Allen's books, I believe these are the only 2 books she's written. Art is a Way of Knowing, which I recommend this, especially if after completing the 8 sessions, you're just really interested in this whole process. This is a great book to read. This explains not so much about her workshops and all of that, but it explains her personal life and experiences, her journey as an artist and art therapist. And kind of how she got to the place of then doing those workshops. So Art is a Way of Knowing. And then her second book, which gets more into talking about the workshops and also the spiritual component, is Art is a Spiritual Path. This gets pretty in depth into the witness writing. She gives lots of examples of her writing and of others, which can get pretty, hard to understand. Like there are definitely places where I skipped through, because you're like reading somebody's like, pages of like free association writing. So it can be kind of hard to understand. But this is where she gets more into talking about the workshops that she led. But Art is a Way of Knowing is a great book if you're interested in kind of these concepts. So I have like my favorite page in this book that is like super underlined and marked. I'm going to read a paragraph and a little bit more out of this to you and kind of talk in between. But first I want to explain, first we'll talk about the spiritual aspect. So Pat Allen's background is that she grew up in the Catholic Church and then converted to Judaism as an adult. So she definitely has this Judeo-Christian sort of mindset and approach to her concepts of the Creator speaking to you through your work. And similar to what I talk about. So, and I am a Christian, and so that's definitely my perspective going into this. I will say though that even in hearing Pat Allen in her books talk about her beliefs as a Jewish woman, it still sounds very open. She's very open to all other forms of spirituality, and to the point where even art is a spiritual path. Like that's one of her paths. A form of her spirituality is her art. So, and even though I am a Christian and hold to those beliefs very firmly, I really resonated with her openness to other faiths. And that's what I'm trying to communicate in the Redefine process as well. That no matter what faith background you have, what belief system, it could be adapted to be a part of this process, because I include that idea that some creator, some sort of higher power or other power that's kind of bigger than us, some other entity, is also kind of there supporting you and can speak to you through your work. Now, I know that that's hard for some. This topic came up in the group this week. So first I'll say, feel free to apply whatever your belief system is to this. And second, if you don't have a spiritual belief system, if that's not a part of the way you think and the way you're approaching this process, then that is fine. And that's a part of the no judgment zone too, which we'll get to. All right, so there's not a wrong way to do this. And I've structured it this way, but you can feel free to adapt it to what makes sense to you. One other suggestion that I didn't comment on the post about this the other day that I'll say here is, I was thinking about in Alcoholics Anonymous and those other 12-step programs, if you're familiar with that, they, it's very based on this idea of a higher power and some entity being greater than you, that's important to kind of surrender to that higher power. And I have had friends and acquaintances and clients who have been involved with AA or other 12-step groups who struggled with that concept. And so what they did, what they identified as sort of their higher power, was just the fellowship of AA itself. So that community of others in those support groups that is an entity and a force and a power that is greater than just them. So that support of the other people. So that's another suggestion that I offer, that if this idea of spirituality and some personal relationship with the creator, if that doesn't resonate with you, then perhaps think about it as the people around you, like a support network. So that could be us here in the group. It could be, any other friends or family or supports you have in place. It could be a therapist as a part of that. So that sort of power in that community and others who identify with you and are here to support and love on you through this journey, that is a power that is bigger than you. So that's another way you can think about this part of our process, as in sessions 3 and 4, we introduced that idea of the creator. Okay, so I wanted to put that out there. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. Great, Adrienne, that's great to hear that that'll work for you. I know you talked about connections with other people as being something important. So that's good to hear. All right. So I'm going to move on to, I'm trying to look at my notes here. I want to stay on track. I tend to go over on these over our time. So the no judgment zone. So that's an important part of what Pat Allen teaches, and also what I'm sharing with you guys as a part of this process. So this is really like a mindfulness concept. So if you're familiar with just sort of the basic concepts of mindfulness, and I'm not, an expert in this by any means, but the basics of mindfulness is sort of an underlying theme here to the process that we're all going through with this program. So the idea of when a thought or emotion comes up, we sort of step back and create some distance between ourselves and that thought or emotion. We're able to observe it and be curious about it and not judge it, and just notice what's happening, what's coming up. So I notice a sense of, anxiety in my body. My stomach feels tense. Wonder what that's about. Well, maybe I had something stressful come up at work earlier today, so maybe that's it. And we just kind of notice it almost as if we're another person observing that. As opposed to coming in and judging and saying, and this is what so many of us do, because we've really been taught this by our abusers, or we might say, oh, I feel this anxiety like in my gut, like, why do I feel that way? What's wrong with me? I have no reason to be anxious today. I shouldn't be, worried about this. Why can't I get focused on work? Why do I keep getting distracted? Like, we just judge ourselves. So this idea of existing in the no judgment zone while we're going through this process and creating our artwork is the same idea of just this general mindfulness concept of noticing feelings and thoughts that come up, and not being negative, not judging them, just noticing them and being curious. I know I talked in my video last week about the sort of waves of emotion and surfing the waves. So you surf or ride the wave of emotion, trusting that it's going to come back down and everything's going to be okay. So you just notice it, you're curious about it. So I'm going to go into reading a little bit of my favorite page of this book. And so here Pat Allen is talking about this concept of image work, which that's how she refers to the process of making the art and just dealing with whatever images come up. So she says that so painful experiences might come up in this work. Now remember, she's speaking more about the spontaneous image making, so just creating like whatever comes to mind. And even though I've given you all more directive tasks here, of course it's still up to you what the image looks like. Okay, so this still applies. It's still whatever images come up for you are unique to you and what's going on in your mind and your emotions that day. So we want to be open and non-judgmental with those images. And she says, we may have had difficult and painful experiences, and image work may reflect that to us. So any painful experiences we've had might be reflected in the images that come up. But ultimately, this image work will also reflect that beyond any experiences we have had, however awful they've been, beyond those experiences is our soul, our essence, perfect and unassailable, our core. So that's our identity, the core of who we are. And so that's why, the focus of the Redefined process is all on finding your identity, and the idea that beyond any painful stuff that comes up, any painful emotions, negative messages, limiting beliefs that are still there hanging out in our brain from our abuser, beyond all of that, is our core and our essence. And we need to trust that we will get to that. And that's the whole point of this process. Okay, and she says the soul's deepest wish is for us to see this and realize that it is this essence we have in common with all beings. So again, there's sort of the spiritual component to the way she talks. And I wanted to point this out also to emphasize what I said a minute ago about that community of other people could be our force greater than ourselves. So the soul's deepest wish is for us to see this and realize that it is this essence we have in common with all beings. So our core, our identity, even though it's unique to us, we have this connection with all other people. She's maybe even insinuating all other living creatures. Like we have some sort of collective like unity there, and that should be comforting to us. So okay, I'm going to read one more sentence. I'm going to read it a couple of times because this is really important. And then I'm going to explain this concept of reflective distance, because I think that's basically what she's explaining here. And again, this relates to the no judgment zone and just being mindful of what's coming up. So she says, to become familiar with our internalized past gives us a perspective. So some distance, some perspective. It becomes only one version of our story. I'll read that again. To become familiar with our internalized past gives us a perspective. It becomes only one version of our story. So I know in my explanation of our writing, I talk about the different parts of ourselves. And so it's like different parts of ourselves can come up. We can observe that. And from another part of who we are, we can ask questions of that part. So she talks about different versions of our story, and I would even say different versions of ourself. So this concept of reflective distance, first I'll explain what it means in terms of just visually with artwork from an artist perspective, but then also from an art therapy perspective. So first, with just within art, reflective distance refers to literally like the physical distance you have from your artwork, because that is going to give you a different perspective and give you more information and more insight about kind of where you need to go with your piece, what you need to do next. So, I'm sure we've all had this experience where you're working really like intimately with a piece of art on the table or at an easel or up on the wall, and you're so close to it, and you could be getting really detailed in one area and neglecting other areas, or just you can't see the full picture. And then a practice that all artists do is you step back from that. I'm constantly stepping back from my work to look at it, and quite literally, visually get a different perspective on it when you step back, and it's easier to see what you need to do next. You get more information from a different view, right? Even you could take this one step further, and you got to be brave though, because this can give you some information you might not like, is to look at your artwork in a mirror, to look at the reflection of the art. So this can be especially upsetting if we're doing something realistic and representational, especially if it's a self-portrait or a portrait of someone else. Faces are hard with this because you think like the face is balanced, the eyes are on the same level, everything looks good, and then you look at it in the mirror and it just reveals, because it's giving you the opposite image, right? So it points out any sort of like unevenness or inconsistencies, things you didn't see before. It gives you a dramatically different perspective. So that can be helpful, but it also can be sort of crushing if you think it looks great and then you don't like the way it looks in the mirror. I even had I'll tell this because I think it's funny. My drawing professor in college was this very, hippie sort of man, tall, skinny white man, very tan with long hair, longer than mine. And little glasses, and he, always wearing shorts and Birkenstocks and like a flannel, plaid shirt to work. And we were talking in my drawing studio one day, and he brought up this concept of looking at your artwork in the mirror. And I totally resonated with that. That was something I already did. And we had this great conversation. And he actually referred to it as like this other world that existed in the mirror. And he got like real spiritual and weird with it. And I remember being simultaneously weirded out by the way he was talking about the other world in the mirror and what it could reveal to us about our work, but also like it really resonated with me, and like I got it, and I was kind of disturbed that like I identified so much with the weird stuff he was saying. I don't really think there's like an alternate universe in the mirror, but it can really give us a lot of information about our art. So reflective distance, that's an extreme example visually looking at it in the mirror, or it could just be stepping back a few feet from your artwork. So in art therapy, when we talk about reflective distance, it's also emotional and this mental distance, right? Kind of what Pat Allen is talking about, where you get a different perspective on it. Often that's done through writing. So through writing and reflecting on our work, we get this reflective distance where we're not so close and intimately involved with it. The writing kind of creates some space there. So that's another rationale for doing the reflective writing that we do. And Pat Allen is talking about that here. So the idea of, again, being mindful and sort of stepping outside of yourself and getting some distance, treating that image as if it is almost another person, it's another entity, another part of ourselves that we can step back from and view with curiosity and with no judgment, and just notice what's there. So again, she said, to become familiar with our internalized past gives us a perspective. It becomes only one version of our story. Then she goes on to say, fears we had as children may no longer be necessary. So things we've held on to might not need to be there anymore. Feelings which were unsafe to express may be painted and drawn and befriended. Remember that the image is the messenger of your soul and never comes to harm you. So again, feelings which were unsafe at one time to express, now they can be painted and drawn and befriended. Now there could be okay to express. So we need not fear what images come up for us in the artwork, because it could be safe now. And also there's some safety in that distance, in the reflective distance, because it is, it's in the drawing, right? We can create that distance because it's physically somewhere else. It's physically on that page. In art therapy, we often talk about the artwork in like an individual art therapy session. We talk about the artwork as being almost like the third person in the room. And it's easier for clients to talk about the artwork than it is to talk about themselves. So we can talk about the anxiety in the artwork, or the pain, or the dark black spots, or whatever in the art. And that feels safer than talking about it with ourselves. And we can talk within that metaphor for a while until we get comfortable talking about it in terms of ourselves, right? So that's what she's talking about here. We can like befriend that image. It's okay. It's safe. And then eventually, hopefully we get to the point where it feels safe to explore deeper. But initially, I mean, it's an image. It's just the image. It's safe to explore. And remember that the image is the messenger of your soul and never comes to harm you. So this is really, I mean, it's stuff coming from your own brain. These images, all the emotions and thoughts that come up, all the like weird stuff that might come out of your brain when you're writing, that's stuff that's coming from you. It's stuff that your brain wants you to know. So it's, she says, a messenger of your soul. It's not there to harm you. If difficult and painful experiences and memories come up, then yeah, I mean, I love that. It's not there to harm you. It's there for your good, because, even just from like a survival perspective, and I don't know much about evolution and science, but it's like we're designed to survive. Like your brain is trying to help you, and anything in your brain that is damaging, like from trauma, with PTSD, things that come up that feel like attacks on our system and on our soul and on our brain and our heart, like those are not things that our brain is like trying to use to harm us. If anything, our reactivity to that is our brain protecting us, right? Like those PTSD reactions, the hypervigilance, all of that, it's our brain trying to protect us from the bad stuff that's happened. So So those images that come up, they're not there to harm you. It's a messenger from your soul, from another part of you. If you want to think about it as a message from your creator, it's there from another part of yourself or another entity that's there to support you. It's never there to harm you. And she brings up then this idea that from art classes that we might have taken, we get this misperception that the image needs to be improved upon. And then she criticizes art therapy a little too, because remember, she's like the rogue art therapist, that art therapy can tell us the image needs to be analyzed. So I'll read the direct quote of what she says, and we'll finish up here in just a minute. She says, the misperception of the art school critique, which for anyone who's taken college art classes, that means when you finish your artwork on a certain date, everybody meets together literally to just critique each other's work. So you're there to hopefully give constructive criticism, but often it's really painful because you've just poured your heart into this and then somebody else is telling you what's wrong with it. So the misperception of the art school critique is that the image needs to be improved through criticism. So there's something wrong with your image, it needs to be improved. And a lot of us, even just having taken elementary school art classes, we have that misperception that our image is wrong and it needs to look a certain way. But again, we're talking about no judgment here. There's not a wrong way to do it. And then the misperception of art therapy is that the image must be analyzed. So we must look at it and say, the fact that you use this symbol must mean this, and that color must mean, this feeling. And that's a misperception because it's not primarily, even clinical art therapy is not about analyzing the artwork. Sometimes it can be, and that's what she's sort of complaining about here. Both of these approaches try to overpower the image with intellect. So it's not about intellect, it's about listening to the image. She says the image needs to be known, seen fully with loving attention, and encouraged to speak. Treated as you would treat an ambassador from a different world, then it will develop and reveal itself according to its own logic. I'll read that one more time. The image needs to be known, seen fully with loving attention, just like we want to be treated, right? We're treating those images with loving attention, and encouraged to speak. We want them to speak more and more. We don't want to hide whatever is coming up from those images. We want to encourage it to come out and speak. Treated as you would treat an ambassador from a different world, then it will develop and reveal itself according to its own logic. So trusting the process, right? We're being open to the process. We're trusting the process, trusting our own minds, trusting ourselves that whatever needs to come out is coming out, and that it's not there to harm us. It's there for our good. We don't need to judge what comes out. We don't need to judge how it looks on the page because we think it's not, drawn well or whatever. It needs to come out. We need to give it attention, acknowledge it, and listen to it. It's there to help us. So I think that's all. Any other comments from my one participant here? You said too much experience being punished for expressing my emotions can make them feel dangerous. Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. We have been told that expressing our feelings, our emotions is wrong. We've been told that everything about our opinions or our preferences is wrong. Human error is wrong. We're making big mistakes. So those are big, like negative voices that we really have to learn to counteract. So yeah, the image isn't there to harm us, even though there have been so many other voices that have come to harm us in our life. The image is not trying to harm us because it's coming from within ourselves, and we can trust that. All right. Yeah, exactly. The danger was the abusive relationship, the abuser. We're not dangerous to ourselves, like the core of who we are, like the goodness in us that is really trying to come out, that's not there to hurt us. The only, and I think I said this before, but it's like the only part that is damaging is like the part that's been affected by abusers, by other negative messages we've gotten from people growing up. I'm going to send out an email. I think it's going to go out tomorrow where I talk briefly about how, as a child, I was so shy, so painfully shy, that I started to sort of recede into the background and people would forget I was there, right? Like, and I grew to expect that people didn't even see me, like in a group, in a classroom. I grew to expect that, and it caused me to change the way I interacted with my world. That was a result of how people responded to my shyness and my quietness. They weren't uncomfortable with it. That wasn't a true part of who I was, that I needed to shrink back. It was something that I was taught by other people based on how they treated me. So this process of uncovering who we really are means we need to listen fully to all of that that's coming out, and sort of, I just got this image in my mind of everything sort of settling, like through, like if you're sifting for, like people sift through sand for gold, or like you're getting rid of all that other stuff and letting it fall, and coming up with the true gold, the real core of who you are, when we get rid of all those other negative messages that have come from others. So, all right. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the group, and next week for sure. Have a good night or afternoon.